Hi, I'm Phil Cooke, and welcome to the Phil Cooke Podcast. There's a lot of branding talk out there today. Everybody on social media is a branding expert. Everybody, in the Christian space and the nonprofit space are branding experts these days. And so I wanted to drill down and get to some simple, focused points of what branding really is, how to be known for something. And we're going to talk about that today with Mark MacDonald. He's a branding expert. In fact, it's funny, his company is called Be Known for Something. I love that focus. And the fact is, if you want to be known for something, if your church or your ministry, your nonprofit, or your whatever project you're involved in, if you want to be known for something, you want your organization to be known for something, we're going to talk about how to make that happen today. So stay tuned. Mark MacDonald, welcome to the Phil Cooke Podcast. We've been talking about doing this for a long time, and we finally were able to schedule it. And I'm so glad you're here. We're going to have a great conversation.
I'm glad you have me on here because this is the best podcast in all of the internet.
Oh, we should replay that a number of times. That's powerful and absolutely true, by the way. No question about it. So here, let's do this. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you've come from, what you do, how you kind of got into this role with communication, media, branding, that sort of thing. Give us a little background.
Wow. Now that's a dangerous question, especially when we both like to talk. So I understand. It's interesting because we were at a conference. We were speaking at a conference together, and we got a great chance to sit down for breakfast. And oh my goodness, like the synergy between the two of us, it's uncanny. So I think that we have a lot to talk about today. But just to give you a little bit of a background.
Yeah,
I'm Mark MacDonald, and I'm from East Coast Canada, and usually, as soon as I say that, people will say, "Oh, I know someone from Canada." Well, Canada's a pretty large country. I'm way East Coast, so I-95 all the way to the top, go through Maine, and then hang right, and that's New Brunswick. But interestingly enough, I guess it's been almost 40 years ago, I was hired by an agency in East Coast Canada, one of the largest agencies in Atlantic Canada. And I kind of climbed my way to the top. And Phil, these days, everyone says, "Oh yeah, I'm going to get a college degree and I'm going to become a creative director," and that's just not the way it happens in the real world. So I was hired as a graphic designer, then slowly worked my way up to being an art director, a junior art director, actually, and then an art director. And then I kept thinking, I just want to be a senior art director. And finally I became a senior art director. And then I realized, no, I really want to be a junior creative director. And I ended up working my way all the way up to senior creative director.
Well, wait a minute. Now, the phrase that stood out to me is slowly worked your way up. That was certainly the case with me. I mean, so many people I meet, younger people today, who want to come out of college or, they get into the business and they want to be the creative director, the producer, the writer. What they want to get right to the top immediately. But it does take a while to work your way up. Am I right?
It really does. And I know that sounds laborious and boring as you work your way up, but when I was I'm not going to make it about everybody else. For me, when I was a designer, I thought I was all that. And it was interesting because, as a designer, I continuously thought, I have what it takes to be an art director, but really I needed to be in that situation and work with other designers and work with other art directors for me to understand and learn the skill set in order to be able to be an art director. And then when I was an art director, it was working side by side with some really good creative people for me to realize what it really took to be a creative director. And so oftentimes we look up and we think, "Oh, I could easily do that," but really, it's God's timing in order for you to fully understand the skill set that's required to be there. And sometimes I oftentimes think if someone's promoted too soon, I call it ruining the person, because they haven't
Yeah.
totally understood all of the steps that are required for the job.
Plus, there's so much stuff you don't get in college, like learning to deal with clients, particularly difficult clients, learning to lead a team, learning to just get along, in the office. I've often said your people skills are more important than whatever skills it takes to do your job. Because if you can't lead and inspire and motivate the people around you, you're not going to go very far in your career. So very often those guys that go shoot right to the top are missing some really critical skills that it just takes time to learn.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I think every position, that anybody wants to be in this whole creative world, it is about dealing with people, and the proper response to criticism, and the proper response to understanding when somebody says something about your work, they're not criticizing you, they're criticizing the work. And oftentimes they can see, their world a whole lot easier than we can see the world. And sometimes we have these, pie in the sky ideas that is like, oh, all they have to do is this, but they're aware of some of the limitations on either side of those, huge creative ideas.
Absolutely true. In fact, it took me a long time to get over they're criticizing the work, not me thing, and to really figure that out. And I was getting my feelings hurt every time
I
my client
mean,
would
Phil,
criticize some
though,
part of the project.
I mean, does anybody really criticize you? I mean, every idea that you've ever come up with always gets fulfilled, right?
Not quite, not quite, not quite. In fact, I've been thrown out of meetings with profanity involved. I mean, it's amazing. You just, particularly in Hollywood, dealing with studios and television networks and things like that. So, yeah, no matter who you are, you've got to learn to deal with people, or you're going to be in trouble in your career at some point.
Oh, for sure. And I continuously go back to how, Jesus said that they'll know you're my disciples by your love one towards another. And oftentimes in especially creative meetings, we need to make sure that we're known for love. Every idea is a good idea until it becomes ruled out. So, you know, we're always just constantly trying to push the envelope, which, you and I could have a great conversation just about the definition of creative, because oftentimes people equate creativity with being clever. And like, how many times have we heard someone say, if it was only a little more clever, like I just want
Yeah,
to like
true.
gouge my ears out, because like ultimately creativity is just doing the unexpected in a way that works. And if it's not unexpected, then it just becomes boring in the long, scheme of things. And then we always have to add in a way that works, because oftentimes our great creative ideas don't always pan out.
Yeah. Well, I've often said that, to have good ideas, you need to have a lot of ideas. And probably out of 10 ideas that I'll have, 5, 6 are terrible, just not workable at all. 2 or 3 are pretty good. And then maybe 1 or possibly 2 could really work. And so people that think every idea they have is brilliant, they're not going to go very far, because, you just
Yeah,
got to.
or there's those people who uh, find an idea that, oh my goodness, I think this works, and I think it's clever, and I think that's it. We're just going to go with it. And they stumble upon a really great idea, but they don't try to come up with other ideas, because oftentimes what ends up happening is, on the back of something that does work, it kind of makes us all relax into, well, what if we could come up with something else? And usually those other ideas they improve on that original idea.
Well, as a good example, I know screenwriters, tons of screenwriters in Hollywood that have boxes and boxes of screenplays they've written that have never seen the light of day. Either they weren't ready to be pitched, they were part of their training, learning the skill, or they just got turned down and rejected. In fact, I know a couple screenwriters in Hollywood that make a pretty good living and have never produced a thing. And it's not because they're terrible at all. It's just it wasn't the right budget. It wasn't the right timing. It wasn't the right studio leadership. There's a million reasons. So just getting used to your ideas not working, I think, is an important part of creativity.
Oh, absolutely. And what's interesting, I think we all have, the portfolio we wished we had because it's like the things that we pitch
Yes.
to a client. I mean, I've pitched thousands of ideas to clients and ultimately, it's the client that's paying. So if they don't like your great idea, it probably means that they understand it won't work as much as we think it's going to work. And I
Yeah.
always, it's like my hat's off to them. As long as, there's those times, and I'm sure that you go through the struggle as well, where it's going to work and they're just not ready to accept that. And so
Yeah.
usually we've worked on it in our heads and with our team in order to kind of walk through how it possibly could work. And sometimes it's just taking a step back and saying, okay, well, I haven't explained it properly we might have spent, 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 hours on understanding how this idea can work. And then when we pitch it, we do it in 2 minutes, and then we wonder why they don't accept it.
Yeah. And to be encouraging, I have a reject file. And what I've discovered is what may not work for one organization, one company, one ministry, one nonprofit will work for others. And so I never throw away anything. I mean, you never, just always put it in the reject file and go back. And it could, what they didn't like may be perfect for somebody else. So I've had that happen numerous times. But anyway, let's get down to the meat of this whole thing.
Okay.
Enough silly stuff. Let's talk about your company name. Tell everybody what the name of your company is.
The name of the company is Be Known for Something.
I love that. Absolutely love it. And I think we live in an age where I remember when I wrote my first book on branding faith back in, I don't know, it was 30 something years ago. Nobody was talking about that in light of churches or ministry organizations. And today, every social media expert is a branding expert. There's millions of them online. And it's almost become a religion. I don't want to, make any enemies here, but it's almost become a religion when, at least in my mind, branding is not that complicated. And I love your phrase, be known for something, because that's really the essence of what it's all about, right?
It sure is. And so to kind of connect the beginning of my, I was up in Canada, worked my way to the top of the big agency world, and worked with multi-million-dollar accounts, did, a lot of the, tourism for all of Atlantic Canada, also worked on Sabian symbols, McCain Foods. So there was a lot of work that I was doing. But the entire time that I was doing this, I kept thinking, why doesn't the church know this? And why is it that, we could have a whole conversation about the difference between sacred and secular. And I don't think that it's as far apart as what we make it. And then oftentimes the sacred goes, oh, that's secular. We don't want any of that. And when I was talking to pastors, because I kept thinking, how do I communicate to them that they need to be doing more marketing and more better communications, branding? And so if I started the conversation about that, I oftentimes stopped the conversation because the pastor would just be, yeah, we don't want that. That's business. That's secular. We're the church. We don't need that. And that was frustrating to me because I knew that God was able to use some of those marketing principles that these big companies, big organizations were using. And maybe if the church would actually use it, that God could use it for the gospel. And so you know, long story made a little bit shorter is that we ended up coming to North Carolina, took over the old Krispy Kreme marketing section in their headquarters building. Where their test kitchens were, we made it into a photo studio. And when it got warm in there with the lights and everything, we could smell glaze in the walls. It was wonderful. And then we set up Be Known for Something, because when we started talking to pastors, if we would say to them, so what do you think you're known for? All of a sudden, the pastor wanted to talk where they didn't want to talk about marketing. And so that's how Be Known for Something got birthed. And in 2026, we're celebrating our 25th year working with churches all across the country, trying to figure out, so what is your current perception? And is that a barrier to actually people listening to the gospel?
That's really good. It's powerful, but it's so simple. It's not a big complicated thing. And why? Okay, why? And here's the other thing: being known for something isn't just an organizational thing, not for a church or a ministry or nonprofit. It's also for people, right? I mean, if you want to move
Absolutely.
your career forward, it's also important. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so it's so interesting because when I wrote the book that became an Amazon bestseller, the Be Known for Something, like how do you actually decide what you should be known for? And that oftentimes has to do with who is your current audience and what should you be known for so that they actually pay attention. And so
Yeah.
What's interesting is that now I'm somewhat outlining an idea for a book about that personal, like we're all known for something. If someone's listening to this right now, you're known for something. And does it help your career? Does it help your job? Does it help your relationships? Or is it something that you need to start thinking, how do I transition from my perception to what I should be known for?
That's good. That's good. And I think, I've said it, I've said it. What do people think of when they think of you? And everybody has that perception, Oprah, Tom Cruise, me, you, everybody has that. I mean, what do people think of when they think of you is really the same thing as being known for something. And I liken it to, remember, I don't know about you Canadians, but when we would have the homecoming dance in high school, we'd sit around a table and say, now, Bob, you're good with numbers. Why don't you do the budget? Or Susan, you're really great in front of people. Why don't you host? Or Sam, you're really creative. Come up with a good theme for us. And very often other people notice what we're good at and that thing we're known for more than we do. We don't think about it as much as sometimes other people do. So I often tell people, look around, ask what people, it was funny, professional athletes. I used to direct for ESPN, and I would have professional football players or, other athletes tell me, I was just the guy in the neighborhood that could catch any ball you threw, or I was just always the fastest guy in my school. And they became known for that. And that's what launched their career. So just being aware of how people perceive you, I think is important in your career.
Oh my goodness. Being able to understand others' perspective of yourself is a huge skill. And we talked about, the relationships with people in this creative world and how we have to, you're always having to deal with people. If you can deal with people from their vantage point, that's just a huge skill set that needs to be honed. It's interesting because Gary Chapman, who wrote the 5 Love Languages, he wrote the foreword to my book,
Right.
Great friend of ours. And the reason why I love it is because he wrote the book about love, the 5 love languages. And in that book, he makes the declaration that if someone's not receiving it as love, is there any sense of us trying to love them that way? And what we need to do is we need to figure out in our communication world, how are they receiving the communication? If you're just spewing words all the time and you're doing it in such a way that they're not receiving it as good communication, which is just called being ignored,
Yes.
then why would you keep doing it? Why don't you figure out how do you communicate better? And oftentimes you have to take it from their vantage point. Effective communication rises and falls on how well you know your audience. Because if you know your audience so well, and actually Jesus said, okay, step that up, be known for love. How do you love your audience? Well, if you love your audience properly, you know what their needs, concerns, and goals are, and you want to make sure that you give them a solution. And so if you package everything that you're communicating in a way that is a solution, they will actually want to need it. So and then they won't ignore you quite as much.
Yeah, George Bernard Shaw said the problem with communication is the illusion that it's taken place. So often we think they understand what we're saying, but it's not what, like you say, it's not what we say, it's what they hear that matters. And so I think you're absolutely right on. The other thing that is important to me is that people should understand that a lot of this has happened because of the acceleration in our culture today. The Wall Street Journal said a couple years ago that when we meet somebody for the first time, we decide what we think of them in the first 4 to 8 seconds. I mean, we got text messages to answer, we got our phone to respond to, we got emails, we got things to do now. And we've changed our behavior so that we make decisions about stuff we really don't know anything about yet. And so we have to provide people a hook, something easy for them to remember us, our church, our ministry, whatever it is. We've just got to make it simple for people in this incredibly accelerated culture to figure out who we are and what we're about pretty quick. Because I tell pastors all the time, I'm glad your sermon's anointed. I'm glad your, worship is great. But in a 4 to 8 second world, what's your parking experience like? What's the lobby look like? Who's the first person a visitor meets when they walk in the door? Because most people today will decide what they think of your church before they get to their chair. And so all those things, this accelerated culture really has impacted this. So finding that easy hook, I think, is critically important. Am I off base here?
Oh my goodness. Like I'm the choir. I'm going to sing behind you. I'm going to sway back and forth. I mean, pulling together what, as a nice callback for the whole idea of clever. Clear beats clever every time. And we have to continuously think, so how do we become clear to somebody? People are looking for a better solution, not a better sermon. And oftentimes our churches and we ourselves, we want to somewhat, tell them what they really need to hear. Well, they don't know what they really need to hear until you give them a solution. So if we can, give them as clearly as possible a solution, and the way, our formula here is say their name, that'll get their attention, speak their pain, that'll really get their attention. If somebody has back pain or if they're struggling with, depression, if you just say the pain out loud, anyone who is experiencing that pain will go, whoa, you understand me. I feel loved. I see, I'm seen. I feel heard. And then, so say their name, speak their pain, then solutions to proclaim, then give the solution, because oftentimes people don't know what they actually need. So you need to give them what they need on the back of what they want.
That's good. So I'm a church communication director. What should I be in light of this
Let's just stop
conversation?
and pray for you right now.
No, I'd kill myself first. No, I'm teasing. So say I'm a church communication director. Based on this conversation, what do I take from this? What are 2 or 3 steps I should take to change the way I look at how our church communicates its message, or ministry, or nonprofit for that matter?
Oh my goodness. So you can't reach everyone. Anyone who tries to reach everyone will end up reaching no one.
Amen.
So really specifically, our logo is a concentric circle speech bubble. And the reason why is you might think you can reach this much, but you probably can only reach this much. So really focus in on what we call personas. You understand personas. Like, give a very clear, specific description of a group of people that's enough to grow a church. and make sure you understand their needs, concerns, and goals. And then from that persona, oftentimes I think that the thing that the church struggles with so much is you have two audiences. So you have an internal audience, but you also have an external audience. And your external audience is the capacity to grow. So understand the capacity to grow, which would be your greater community, but also understand your inside community. And you might have a persona of who you are internally. For most churches, that means that you're older than your external community. And so you've got to understand that internal group, which probably will understand the changes that have to occur in order to reach the community a lot more than you think, because oftentimes you think, oh, I better not do that because that's just going to tick off the people that are inside our church. It takes quite a bit for somebody to leave the church, especially if they're 70 years old and they have been in the church for 30 years. They're not going to just jump. Instead, you've got to cast the vision that we need to make sure that we are a church for this community. And here's what the community looks like. Oftentimes similar to the algorithms that we all criticize, we oftentimes have this feeling that everyone looks like me. And that's not the case. So what you've got to do is start communicating internally what the outside looks like and how different we are, and how do we reach the community better, and how do we start looking more like the community. I'm getting older. I'm not as old as, oh no, I better not say that. So
I get it.
Yeah, we're very close in age. So, but the interesting thing is that oftentimes, just as a practical thing that people can do, oftentimes it's the older people in a church that will have been put together as a committee to decorate the church. And so when a younger group of people, 30 somethings, which is usually what a community's average age is, when they walk through the doors, they see the church as, like a grandparent's house that has been set up to make all the grandparents really, really comfortable, and they won't feel like they're part of it. So if you want to try to look younger, get some younger people on that committee and actually listen to them, understand what they're talking about.
I like what you said earlier about you can't reach everybody. So let's focus on the people we can reach, the low-hanging fruit. And the truth is, we are called to reach the world, but I think if every church focused on what they're really good at and who their community, that audience is, we could reach the world. We would reach the world. Instead of all trying to do the same thing, we ought to be focusing on those people that are most likely to align with our message, to align with our team, our people, our congregation, our vision, our mission, all that kind of stuff. So I can't, are you still getting any pushback from pastors? I used to a lot. This was a big controversial thing years ago, but today I'm seeing more and more pastors and leaders who get it. Are you feeling that too?
The shift is happening. There are still, depending on what denomination you're kind of living in, there's still some pushback, and I get it. I understand, because what marketing oftentimes feels like, the perception of marketing, is that you need to change your message in order to reach a group of people. And you tell a pastor that, and instantly you do not tell me that I have to change the gospel message.
Right.
Well, I'm here today to say, don't change the gospel message, but you might want to give a better introduction to the gospel message.
That's a good way to put it. Or you may want to package it in a different way. That's really well said. I mean, I was at a church recently that they're still singing hymns only, and they haven't crossed the bridge into drums yet. And so, and you don't have to, it's okay. If you want to be traditional like that, that's okay. But it's just interesting to see how far apart so many churches are. So my thing is, if you're a small church, for instance, Don't try to be like the big church down the road. Be who you are. Last Christmas, my wife and I visited a number of different church Christmas programs, and we went to this small church that was desperately trying to be the big church in town. And they had a fog machine and they blasted the fog machine. They couldn't afford to hire the people that knew how to run it. And before long, the whole stage was enveloped in fog and the singer started choking and bumping into things because they couldn't see. It became a total disaster. And I thought it's all because they're trying so hard to be who they're not. So, quit trying to be who you're not and focus on who you are and be that brilliantly.
Oh my goodness. And what we have to remember in the perception of the church today, that the word church, there was a worldwide perception study done of religious terminology. And when asked, globally, what do you think of Jesus? People are like, oh yeah, he's a cool guy. Like, and even in outside of Christianity, they respect Jesus. But then asked about church, then all of a sudden the perception went way down. It's like a distribution problem. We have a great product, but a terrible way to distribute it. And so we need to change the perception of what the church is all about. And if left unchecked, if you aren't trying to be known for something, then you will be known for what you're against. Because that's the perception, especially in America today, is all of our rules, all the things that are going to restrict me from living my life. And what we need to do, that's why we added the be known for something, because we have to concentrate and really, really focus on how do we have a positive perception that overcomes all of that negativity.
Okay, just to emphasize and remind people, this is, as you said, this is not about watering down the gospel. This is not about changing your theology. It's not about making the message light. You preach the gospel, and it's just a matter of how you present it and how you package it, and how you who you're trying to reach, and focusing on those things. So it's absolutely not about compromise, right?
Not at all. And similar to the way that I knew how to shut down a conversation with the pastor by talking about marketing. But if I start talking about perception and being known for something, then I'm not changing my message at all. I've just packaged it totally different. I love how you said that. And oftentimes we need to figure out, how do we give them what they need on the back of what they want? And if they really want a solution, we need to understand their pain to a point that they can get a solution from us and then lead to the gospel. If you start with the gospel story too soon, if you start with Jesus too soon, you're going to shut down conversations that could lead to the gospel.
That's great. Great. All right. What have we left out? Anything you want to leave people with today?
Oh my goodness. I mean, you said the buzzword earlier. I mean, we're bombarded with noise. Oh my goodness. There's so much noise today, and that's really our, the big enemy of all communication. And if you're not being really clear and focusing on figuring out how do you unify and make your message clear, you will always get lost in the noise. And that's where the church today, when they drive down through town, like when I talk to a pastor, I'll oftentimes say, oh, everybody knows us in our community. And then you just talk to somebody randomly, I'll check into a hotel near a church, and I'll just say, I'm here over the weekend. Do you know any good church nearby? And oftentimes the church is within a couple of blocks of the hotel, and the clerk will say, I'm not probably the best person to ask because I don't know any churches. And what we have to understand is that there's a lot of people in our communities who have not given any time in thought about church. And we've got to figure out, how do we just open the door so that we can clearly help them understand, I might consider church for that reason.
And just recently, for what it's worth, Relevant Magazine highlighted that study done that indicated that 85% of non-believers would visit a church if somebody invited them. So it's not that the world is that hostile. There are hostile people out there, of course, but 85% of people would actually show up if you invited them. So there's a lot of work for us to do. And a lot of it just rests with us being able to go out and do that. I don't understand why we don't invite more people, but we absolutely should.
Well, and
That's another high
I
horse. That's
mean,
another
going down
episode.
that, that is another episode, because I get to do mystery visits or secret shopper, style stuff
yeah.
with churches. And oftentimes the pastor will say to me, "You just will not believe how friendly our church is." And I walk through the doors, and oftentimes I walk through the doors and spend 1 to 2 hours of my time and leave. And except for the paid hit people, no one is friendly to me. You see friendliness all around you, but you don't feel like you're welcomed into it. And I believe that, especially in our culture today, pastors and communications people need to figure out how to train people to be friendly, because left unchecked, they're just not all that friendly. And in the same sense,
yeah, it's natural.
If you, yeah, and it left unchecked, people will not invite people to church. I mean, I think that we like to sell the latest Costco find a whole lot better than the salvation of our souls.
That's true. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's true. So how do we find out more about Mark? Where do we go? What do we do? How do we find out more about what you're doing?
Oh my goodness. So first of all, you need to find more about Phil Cooke, because
No. We're talking
guru.
about Mark here.
So go to beknownforsomething.com, and that's probably the easiest way to find me. But I'm also on all the social media. Even somebody this week said, "Are you on Pinterest?" And I am on Pinterest. I have hundreds and hundreds of pins. And usually that's under Mark Mac 1023, because the full name was too long, and there's a whole bunch of reasons.
Well, and I would recommend strongly your book of the same title, Be Known for Something. I really encourage people to get that, and then get that for your website or Amazon or wherever. I don't know where to go in Canada, but wherever you are, it's a great book, and I really recommend it.
Yeah, it's on Amazon, and it's available on audio as well as digital, and then you can get the print copy as well.
Well, listen, I do think we need to do this again, because this is fun stuff. I could talk about this for hours, and so let's just plan on coming back. And thank you so much for being here. And it took us a long time to make it happen, but it worked out, and we're going to make it happen faster next time, because this is really important stuff that a lot of people. I had lunch with the pastor yesterday, and half the stuff we just talked about, he was asking me about. So a lot of pastors are wondering about it, and I want to keep talking about it because it's incredibly important. So thanks for taking the time. Well, Mark is fantastic, and I love having him on. We're going to have him on in the future. And while we're talking about this whole branding subject, I just want to remind you that my book, Maximize Your Influence, is really focused on how to get your story out there more effectively. If you don't have that, you should. In this digital age, you need a resource like my book, Maximize Your Influence. It'll make a big difference for you. And if you want to really drill down into branding, my book, Unique, How to Tell Your Story in the Age of Brands and Social Media, is probably, it came from my original book, Branding Faith, which I think was the first book on branding in a Christian ministry, religious context. So Unique is more of an updated version, and it's about branding in this social media age that we live in. And if you really want to take a deep dive, that's the book to go to. But for practical, everyday stuff, if you're a speaker, if you're a writer, if you're a creative person of any kind, get my book, Maximize Your Influence. It'll really make a dramatic difference on your life. So stay tuned for future episodes about these kind of topics, because getting your story out there is what we're all about, and what I want to really help people do in this coming year. Thanks for watching.